Hello Knights, Miss Buhowen here, bringing you this week's lesson on solving two-step equations. I really hope you had a great weekend and ready to get started for another successful week. Let's get to it. This week we will be covering Standard 7.EE4A, and our objective is I will extend my knowledge of solving equations to solving two-step equations using DC-MAM. Because last week we covered our 6th grade standard and we were solving simple equations. So this week we're just pushing that a little further, making it a little harder. Definitely did not want last week to be all about vocabulary words, so this week we're going to be introducing 3 more vocabulary words, one of which you've already heard about. The first one being variable. And a variable is a symbol or a letter for a number we don't know yet. So it just stands for an unknown value. The second is coefficient, the number being multiplied by a variable. I'll show you what this looks like in a little bit. And then our last vocabulary word is constant. A constant is a value that doesn't change. If you are constantly doing something, you're always doing it. So here, again, a constant is a value that doesn't change. It's the number by itself. So, for our example, the one that is pointing to the x, well, that is your variable. It is your letter. It stands for an unknown value. The 4 in front of the x, well, remember from last week, we know that when a number is next to a variable, no symbol in between, we know the operation is multiplication. So that makes your 4 the coefficient because it is the number being multiplied by a variable, which makes your 7 and your 5 your constants. They do not change. That 7 will always be 7, that 5 will always be 5. They are the numbers by themselves. Last part for this side. Remember, the goal to solving equations is to isolate the variable. So we want that variable to be by itself. So in our example, our variable is x. And what you should notice about that x is that it is not by itself. It is next to that 7 and it is also next to the 4. So to solve this, we would use DC-MAM. And remember from last week, the good thing about 7th grade solving equations is that you do not use the D, the C, or the first M. We're going to save that all for 8th grade. Well, let us get straight into it. Just a couple of reminders from last week. Our steps are as follows. First step is that we're going to draw our wall, just a line between our equal sign, separating the left side and right side of our equation. Second, we're going to circle our variable and ask ourselves, is our variable isolated? Is it by itself? If it is, we're done. If it's not, we have to still go. We have to keep going. Not going to erase that. Step 3, we're going to use our DC-MAM, and again, we're not going to do the D, the C, or the M, saving that for the 8th grade. And then our last step is we are going to be checking our answer. Good thing about solving equations, we can always know when we are correct. Let's go ahead and begin. Example number 1, negative 11b plus 7 is equal to 40. First things first, I'm going to draw my line between my equal sign, separating the left side and right side of my equation. Next, I am going to circle my variable. My variable is b. There it is. Sorry for my dogs. They are barking right now. Next step, I'm going to use my DC-MAM. I don't have to distribute, combine, or move. So now my question is, do I see any addition or subtraction? I do. I see addition because they are adding 7. So again, I'm going to do the inverse operation, which is subtraction. So since they added 7, I'm going to subtract 7. And what I do to one side, I do to the other. 7 minus 7 is 0. So different from last week, I'm going to bring this whole thing down. But it's not just a variable. I have negative 11b is equal to 40 minus 7. I sure hope you guys are not doing this by hand, but use a calculator. You can Google calculator or you can use your Chromebook's calculator. Since I don't have one, I am going to do it by hand, or I don't want to use mine. 10 minus 7 is 3, 3 minus 0 is 3, and it is positive. And I want you to notice that here is my variable, and the crazy thing about that is that is not by itself. It is not isolated. We still have that 11 right next to it. So although this step is now done, we are not finished yet. Alright, so when a variable is next to a number, I know my operation is multiplication, and here I see that they're multiplying by a negative 11. So I have to do the opposite of that. The opposite of multiplying by a negative 11 is dividing by a negative 11. Notice that the number does not change, it's just the operation. So I'm going to use my fraction bar to mean division, write my negative 11 right under, and what I do to one side, I do to the other. Negative 11 divided by negative 11 is 1, so b is equal to 33 divided by 11 is 3. And I kind of ran out of room right there, so I'm going to go ahead and draw my dead man right here. I see that I do have at least one negative. Ooh, did you catch my mistake? On this side, I divided by a negative 11, and here I divided by a positive 11. Definitely leaving that mistake in there, and I'm just going to correct it. I have to divide by the same number. Okay, so now I see that there is at least one negative, so I use my dead man, cross out the negative because of the negative 11, the positive because of the positive 33, so I know my answer is going to be a negative. So here my final answer is b is equal to a negative 3. Let's go ahead and check it. So I already rewrote my equation, substituting my variable for parentheses, and I'm going to go ahead and draw or write in my answer for that, what I got for x. So since I got, well, b. Since I got b is equal to negative 3, I replaced, or what I put inside the parentheses is a negative 3. Order of operations tells us I need to do what's inside the parentheses first. 11 times 3 is 33. And again, if I use my dead man, two negatives give me a positive. Bring everything else down. 33 plus 7 does give me a 40. 40 does equal to 40, so I'm done. Sorry for all the mistakes on that one. Example number 2, you're going to notice that it is a little different. I don't want you guys to get confused about any question that might be a little harder than the ones that we're covering, so I'm going to add those harder ones in here. So what you're going to notice is that the variable is not in the quote-unquote correct place. Usually it comes first and now it is second. So that's very easily fixed. All we have to do is rewrite it. So that is going to be our first step. So make sure everything stays the same. I have x over negative 4, and I see a 9, and I know that is equal to negative 18. But what I want you to be very careful about is the signs. Notice that the sign of this term here, well, that's positive. So I know that this one is going to stay positive. Next, the sign of the 9 is negative. So I'm going to go ahead and write in my negative, and it's going to look like a minus sign. That's perfectly fine. I know the biggest mistake that you guys are going to want to make is say that the 9 is positive because of that sign there, and that's just not true. The sign of a number is never behind it, but in front of it. So the sign of the 9 is negative. The sign of x over negative 4 is positive. So be careful with that. All right, let us continue. Let's go ahead and we draw our wall. Identify our variable. It is right there and not by itself. We know we don't have to distribute, combine, or move. And I do see subtraction, so I'm going to go ahead and do the inverse of subtracting 9, and that is adding 9. I'm going to go ahead and write it right here. And what I do to one side, I do to the other. 9 minus 9 is 0. I bring down my x over negative 4 is equal to, well, since my 18 is negative, I know I'm going to have to use my CSAS. Good thing about this, I can skip a lot of those steps, and it is stacked correctly. My bigger absolute value is on top. So I now just need to decide, do I add these or do I subtract these? Since the signs are different, I know I have to subtract. 18 minus 9 is 9. And I bring down the sign of the bigger dude, which is the number on top, and it is negative. But again, my x is not by itself. I am not done yet. And that's what makes this a two-step equation. Just because we did one step doesn't mean we're done. We're going to have to do our last step, which is either multiplication or division. It all depends on what do you see. Well, I see a fraction bar. There it is right there. And since I see a fraction bar, I know that stands for division. So I'm going to do the inverse operation, which is multiplication. And I see that they're dividing by a negative 4. So I have to do the opposite of that, which is to multiply by negative 4. Notice again that it's the same exact number, including the sign. We're just taking the inverse operation, not the inverse of the number. And what you do to one side, you do to the other. 4 divided by negative 4. Negative 4 divided by negative 4 is 1. So I get 1x, or just x. Actually, I don't want to write the 1x. X is equal to 9 times 4. Again, if you don't know your multiplication, division, you need some help with your addition or subtraction, use a calculator. 9 times 4 is 36. Let me go ahead and draw my dead man. There he is right there. I have a negative 9 and a negative 4, so that means my answer is going to be positive. And yay for us, we are done. X equals 36. Last step on this one is to check our answer, and I'm going to try to squeeze this in as best as I can. So again, I rewrote my equation where when I saw my variable, I wrote parentheses. I'm going to fill in the parentheses with my solution or the answer that I got for x. So instead of x, I'm going to go ahead and write 36. So I have 36 on top, right here. Okay, order of operations tells us I need to divide first. So 36 divided by 4 is going to give me 9. And again, I have to use my dead man because there is at least one negative. 36 is positive, 4 is negative, so it is a negative 9 minus 9 is equal to negative 18. So here I have a circle stack add subtract problem. So I circle negative 9 and a negative 9. I stack, doesn't matter which one goes on top, they're the same absolute value. And then I add because the signs are the same. Keep the sign of the bigger dude, which is negative. So negative 18 does equal negative 18. So I did that one correctly. Yay for us. Oh, man, I am running out of room. It's okay, we'll make it work. Sorry, I had to move my paper up. I am just running out of room. So last example, I did want to throw in here because it looks different and it will definitely kind of try to trick you if you don't know how to do this or if you've never seen it before. So again, I'm working with my DC Man. I'm going to go ahead and change my pen color, fill it green. I know I'm not going to distribute, combine, or move. Well, but first I have to draw my wall and identify my variable. Right there, it is y and it is not by itself. It has this negative 8 next to it and it has this negative sign in front of it. That does count. The funny thing about that, whenever you have a negative just randomly in front of a variable, it is an imaginary number and that imaginary number is 1. Oh man, that green is not going to work with me because you can barely see it. So again, it is an imaginary 1. So my number is a negative 1, y minus 8 is equal to 0. Actually, let me rewrite that. Next up, I am on the AS part of my circle stack add subtract. So here's my variable y. It is not by itself. And what operation do we see? Well, we see subtraction. So we're going to go ahead and do the inverse, which is addition. Since they are subtracting by 8, I know that I'm going to have to add 8. And what you do to one side, you do to the other. 8 minus 8 is 0. And I'm going to go ahead and bring down my negative 1. Y is equal to 0. Well, look, I did it again. I have a mistake and I'm going to leave it in there. I want you guys to notice that on one side I have a plus 8 and on the other side I have a minus 8. That just can't be. I know that I have to do the same operation on both sides, so I have to add 8. Be very careful. I'm a teacher and I've made 2 mistakes in this whole video. Well, more than that, but 2 mathematical mistakes in this video. So always make sure to check your work. That next part is going to be very important. 0 plus 8, that's going to give me 8. And what you should notice is that our variable y is still not by itself, so I have to keep going. Even though this step is done, I'm on my multiplication division step. So what do we see? We see a number next to a variable, and when there's a number next to a variable, I know that the operation is multiplication. So that means I'm going to have to divide. I see that they're multiplying by a negative 1, so I have to divide by a negative 1. And what we do to one side, we do to the other. Exactly the same, number and all. Okay, negative 1 divided by negative 1 is 1. So I get y is equal to 8 divided by 1 is going to give me 8. And I know I'm going to have another dead man because I am dividing by a negative. 8 is positive, 1 is negative, so my answer is going to be a negative 8. So here I get y is equal to negative 8. And I know I'm done. 1, because I ran out of steps, and 2, because our variable y is isolated. Last but not least is to check. So I need to substitute my x with my solution, my y with my solution. So I'm going to put negative 8 into that parentheses. And there's this crazy looking thing right here. We got a negative and a negative right next to each other. And what we should remember from our previous lessons is that a negative and a negative, we combine them to make it a giant positive. So here we have a positive 8 minus 8 is equal to 0. And the good thing is we know that 8 minus 8 is 0. So our work checks out. Great job. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. This is it. This is the only thing that you have to do for today is get these notes copied down. The good thing is that if you missed anything, you can pause it, you can rewind it, and if you have any questions, please do write your questions down on that margin, and when your teacher has a live session, you ask them then. All right, hope you have a good day. Miss B out. Goodbye, nights.